ACI Dealing Certificate program is offered by the ACI FMA, which is based in Paris, and the ACI in Paris has structured the exam under 5 topics: financial markets environment, foreign exchange, rates, derivatives, and financial market applications. The benefit of the program is that it offers people who are new into the dealing room environment, in other words, between 0 and 18 months experience, to be able to get an understanding of both how the instruments work in each of the markets, as well as the mechanism for the behavior of people who work in the markets. In other words, guiding them as far as the codes of conduct, how they're expected to behave. It speaks about the structure of a treasury, with the front office being the dealing room, and then the functions of both the back office and the middle office. In the section on foreign exchange, we deal with spot rates and the mechanism for calculating values in the spot market. We look at cross rates, and then we examine the mechanism of hedging using the forward foreign exchange market. In the section on rates, we look at 3 different disciplines. Firstly, we look at money market for the short end of the yield curve, say 0 to 3 years. And in that section, what we examine are both yield instruments and discount instruments. The yield instruments, interest-bearing instruments, both regular deposits, call and term, as well as instruments that are negotiable, certificates of deposit. We then also examine discount instruments being treasury bills, both the duration, in other words, the term of issue, and the mechanism for calculating the value of a discount instrument and its comparative yield. From there, we move into the longer end of the yield curve, and we examine the fixed income market, looking at the characteristics of bonds, the pricing of bonds, and then looking at some of the yield calculations, like the current yield and running yield. Beyond that, we examine the repo market. The repo market brings the bond market and the money market together, where people are able to borrow bonds through the repo or to lend bonds through the repo. And in that section, we look both at the mechanism of the repo and calculations around the repo market. When it comes to derivatives, we examine interest rate and currency derivatives. In the interest rate market, we examine the short-term instruments like forward rate agreements, FRAs, and short-term interest rate futures. Once again, the syllabus has been adjusted to incorporate the new risk-free benchmarks, SOFR, Saron, ESTA, TONA, and SONIA. From there, we move into the longer-term interest rate products, like interest rate swaps. We examine both the application of interest rate swaps, and then we examine the characteristics of cross-currency swaps or currency swaps, and we look at the characteristics of overnight index swaps. We then move into the area of options, where we examine simple calls and puts, describing the expiry profile and the risk around being short or being long options. And then we examine trading strategies where traders will trade volatility. We refer to those as straddles and strangles. And then we examine the use of interest rate derivatives like caps, floors, and collars. Lastly, we examine the characteristics of currency options, how they are traded, and how the coupon or the premium is paid for options. Finally, we move into the section on financial market applications. In the section on financial market applications, we examine asset and liability management, the techniques, and the duration of interest rates, as well as the transfer rates applied in the bank's banking book. Lastly, we look at risk management. We identify 2 major risks: market risk and credit risk. And within market risk, we examine interest rate risk and exchange rate or currency risk. In addition to that, we examine other risks like legal, reputation, model risk, and lastly, in finality, we examine some of the abbreviations that are common to all of these markets. I believe that many countries have adopted the ACI Dealing Certificate as a benchmark to measure the capability of people that work in the Treasury environment. I feel it is an excellent program to introduce young aspirant dealers and people who are already trading in the markets to the way that the mechanism works in the financial markets.